Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. We are so happy to have you here. Tonight, we have another amazing guest speaker, facilitator. His name is Sam Ferrand. And Sam was our very first volunteer way back in 2015, I'm going to say. And Sam and I are former colleagues. We're good friends as well. Sam, oh, did we hear, did someone ask something? Oh. So Sam has been a thought leader for Prosperity Ready from the very beginning and was really instrumental in helping me think through the employment life cycle as it pertained to immigrants. And he was the person who helped me get that down on paper. And having that in one spot to be able to take to different nonprofits and state leaders who could help this effort was really important. So we're very excited to have Sam here tonight. He is currently working at Medtronic, which is a Fortune 100 organization. They are global, and they are an organization that creates and manufactures life-saving equipment for many, many people across the globe. Sam is a talent management manager at Medtronic. He's got deep expertise in recruiting as well. And he personally is somebody who is an expert at figuring out where he wants to take his career and building the relationships that are necessary to make his career goals happen.
Thank you for that warm introduction. One thing that Lisa didn't share, you're too humble, Lisa, is that Lisa is and has been one of my greatest mentors in my career, and I think certainly my ability to navigate my career thus far, in a large degree, has been credited to her advice and expertise in the space. So you're learning from one of the best. So with that, if you could advance the slide to the next, Claudia. So yeah, thank you for participating in that poll, and certainly hear those concerns loud and clear. I think, anytime that we are interviewing for a new role, we're stepping into something that's unknown, right? I mean, obviously you wouldn't have been applying for a job if you weren't ready for a new phase or a new page that you're turning within your life book. And so I think anytime that happens, it's incredibly scary. And, it can be incredibly exhausting. So I hope that I can give you guys a little bit of nuggets of wisdom from at least my vantage point, and know that my vantage point is just that one, right? And so there will be other people that might have a different point of view, but I think the content that we'll discuss tonight will hopefully give you guys a little bit more confidence in what you're going to bring to the table. So in terms of learning objectives, we're going to review interview strategies and preparation primarily for initial screening interviews, and then also for formal interviews. So for those of you that don't know, typically when you engage in a search, usually you apply for the role, you then have some level of screening, and then kind of a formal process. And it, sometimes can be 3 steps, sometimes can be 8 steps. It depends on the company, the hiring team, and the rigor in which they put forward. So the next objective is understand what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for, and then finally learn the factors to consider when deciding whether to accept an offer and what factors are negotiable. So going back to that person that is nervous about negotiating for salary, we'll dive into that as well. So if you could advance, Claudia. Thank you. Agenda-wise, in this order, we'll look at interview preparation, what recruiters are looking for, the process of interviewing, and then negotiating offers. Cool. All right. So a little bit about screening interviews. So like I said, typically in a job search, you are either going to a website that houses many different companies' jobs, or you're going directly to the company's career site. And from there, you would search the job that you're looking for, or maybe if you're part of like a LinkedIn, they're recommending jobs for you, and they'll take you to a link. You apply for a role, and then a recruiter will be on the back end of that process, looking at your credentials, looking at them in conjunction with what the need for the position is, and then they, based on that, may extend a screening interview to you. So a couple things about screening interviews. So usually done by a recruiter, occasionally by a hiring leader. I think, especially in this job market with as many roles that are open, recruiters are really stretched. So there are times when they will delegate to other people on the hiring team to do that initial step. It's almost always done over the phone. So find a quiet place to talk and post the do not disturb sign on the door. One thing that I would say about point number 2 is, again, largely I would say most screening interviews do happen over the phone. However, in this new kind of talent market that we're in, I'm also seeing a lot of written screening questions. So, and I used to employ those as a recruiter at times. If I had really high rec loads, I would send out like Word templates, and people would fill them out and send them back for me to review. The other that is even more innovative, and actually, if I was still in recruiting, I would leverage the heck out of it, because I think it demonstrates a candidate's ability to navigate technology and present themselves. But there are video prompts. So there will be a question, and then you'll have, roughly, let's say 60 seconds to reply in a video to that question. And then that gets sent back to the hiring team for them to review. So just know that might come in different forms. So number 3, the purpose is to, what is a rec load? Oh, good question, Lisa. Thank you for breaking down industry jargon. So requisitions are jobs that are posted. So when you go out to Indeed and you see a job, that's technically, in recruiting land, a requisition. And usually recruiters have, when I was recruiting, I had anywhere between 30 to 40 requisitions at one given time. So, and usually about 100 candidates per requisition. So pretty high volume, lots of people that you're navigating. Number 3, the purpose to evaluate. Oh, sorry. The purpose is to evaluate your work history in a more in-depth way, look for holes and discrepancies, and decide whether to take you to the next interview step. So, when we're screening, it's really about ensuring that we're going to maximize that hiring team's time. And so they're looking to make sure that you're going to be the best fit for the role in conjunction with maybe, let's say, like 4 or 5 other candidates. So they're looking for the best of the best. Number 4, keep your resume in front of you while you're on the phone, and your list of accomplishments. So I always think it's really, I totally agree with this one. And I think it's good to kind of write it out in bullet point form in terms of, the timeline, the accomplishments you had, your learnings through those times, as well as maybe hurdles that you had and how you overcame them. So thinking kind of holistically across your career timeline is really helpful. And it primes you to be able to move kind of nimbly. Number 5, answer the questions directly and don't ramble. Keep answers under 2 minutes. So, I think, again, taking some prep time to understand what your resume and your career history was and what you learned, what hurdles you had, will help you be more succinct in communicating that. Because at the end of the day, you probably have 20 to 30 minutes to make an impression in a screening interview. Mine were usually around the 30-minute mark, and if it wasn't going well, it would be condensed to the 20-minute mark. So know that.
Sam,
Number 6.
ask, before we get to the last one about kind of the closing of a screening, can I ask you a couple questions that we don't have necessarily in the content? So
Love it.
two
No,
things,
ask.
yeah, two things that you and I have been talking about a lot since Prosperity Ready has been doing this training for immigrant degreed professionals. Tell us a little bit about how a job description connects to a professional's resume. And then secondly, how do you, well, you're a former recruiter, but how do recruiters typically process somebody's resume, whether it was sent in an applicant tracking system or sent in as a referral? Because I think that's important for our group. They are all working really hard on their resumes with resume coaches, but just understanding how a recruiter with way more than too many requisitions than they should have to be able to even look through. How do you like scan through that and make that decision on who to actually call?
Yeah. So those are really great questions. I think the first one that you asked was around how a requisition or the wording on a requisition should link to a resume. And typically, hiring teams, hiring managers will have a level of influence in that job description. So usually a company has kind of a templated one that recruiters will send that team to say, hey, make sure these specs fit what you're looking for. And then they, will wordsmith it. So one kind of big golden nugget that I will give you guys as a piece of advice would be, as much as you can, link your resume to the exact wording that is listed in a requisition. So especially around the qualification. So try and leverage, the wording that they use and the accomplishments that they're looking to have demonstrated, and make sure that those are competencies that you clearly articulate within your resume. The second piece was around how recruiters kind of evaluate a resume. And so I'll speak for myself. As a person of color, as a gay man, I'm very aware of bias, right? And so for my roles, I did try and print out the PDFs of each resume, and I would scan through them. And the thing that I was looking for is I would look for the requirements. So the years of experience that are like a basic requirement. If it says basic requirement, you need to have those. There's no negotiation there. If you don't have 8 years of required experience and you're trying to apply for a role, you will be disqualified. So making sure that your experience is aligned to those basic requirements is really important. The preferred requirements that usually are called out on a resume, those are more nice to have, right? And so as much as you can, demonstrate those. But to answer your question, Lisa, a lot of recruiters that might not be as aware of bias will use keyword searches, right? So there might be 5 different words that they're trying to pin down in conjunction with the basic requirements, right? And so they will scan through that and pull those resumes that have certain words, and then the rest they usually will turn down. So again, making sure that your resume links as closely as it can to the job description and the qualifications that they're looking for will set you up for success. Does that answer your question, Lisa, or questions? Okay, cool. So finally, you guys, thank the recruiter for their time and ask if they have anything else that they need, anything else from you. Always remember to ask what are the next steps in the process. So kind of what I alluded to earlier, don't assume that a hiring process is going to be done within a month, or that there's going to be 3 interviews and you're done. I mean, I think back to various jobs that I interviewed for, and sometimes there'd be 7, even 8 rounds of interviews, right? As painful as that is, a company is trying to do their best to make sure that you're going to be the best fit for the role, and vice versa. So making sure that you have visibility in terms of what that process looks like, what the next steps will be, is really helpful for you, just in terms of kind of tempering your own expectations and making sure that you're ready to meet the needs of the hiring team. And yeah, I mean, I think, just having basic courtesy to thank people for their time. And that is true across, the steps of the process. So, it might be the recruiter first, but, every person that you come into contact with, try and find a way to personally thank them is really a must. Claudia, you can advance. Thank you. So we have a short little video on what employers and recruiters are looking for and react to.
For some people, being in contact with recruiters can seem intimidating. However, I assure you that recruiters want the best for both candidates and the company. Good recruiters would also want you to have the best possible experience through the recruitment process. But even though they would like the best for you, there are certain things which are confidential or simply can't be shared with you. I'm Marat from Emotion, myemotion.com, career and recruitment agency. Look me up on LinkedIn. Please subscribe to my channel below and hit the little bell so you won't miss out on the latest career and personal growth content. Also, thumb up the video if you feel it was useful. Here come 5 things that recruiters won't tell you, but what I think you should know. Number 1, you didn't stand a chance after a bad first impression. First impressions are still very meaningful. There are some recruiters which will put first impressions aside, but unreturned calls, bad manners, sloppy interview will definitely hurt your chances for the next round. If you made a negative first impression, you must really dazzle to make up for it. For many positions, interviewers care more about the likability of a candidate rather than the overall qualification for the job. The person who is interviewing you might be your future manager, and it's completely normal that they wouldn't want to hire someone they don't like or someone they are not comfortable working with. Number 2, you could have gotten a higher salary. Salary negotiations are a bit tug of war. Both job seekers and recruiters try to get the most suitable deal. No company would ever admit that they would actually pay more. There is often a salary range that recruiters have for each role, and a lot of times the initial salary offer can be negotiated to a higher amount. Keep in mind that the recruiter wants to make the placement. This means they will support you in getting what you want, if that's what it takes to fill the position. Your references were bad. If a recruiter or hiring manager have doubts about you, they won't let you know if your unflattering references confirm their doubts. Bad references can ruin your candidacy as much as the good ones can make it stronger. If you give out references, it should be one of those who will say positive things about you. Even if you choose not to give out anyone at your current job as a reference, backdoor references is now a sneaky way for hiring managers and recruiters to gather more information about you. It means they will reach out to mutual connections to get their honest opinion of you. So aside from your official references, backdoor references can be especially common when you're looking for a job in different sectors, like tech, for example. Number 4, your social media ruined your chances. What you've heard is true. Almost 80% of recruiters or hiring managers use social media to check out their applicants' social media presence, which is why your social media has to reflect the image of the brand you are projecting. It should be complementing your resume. In a way, speak how truthful everything about you is. Also, potential employers don't usually want to see strong political views or posts or any information that could be considered offensive to anyone. Number 5, your appearance matters. Unfortunately, don't judge a book by its cover do not apply to most of job interviews. The candidate's appearance should be completely irrelevant, but it can charm or scare the hiring manager. Of course, the company is hiring you for your skills and capabilities, but the way you are dressed and groomed is just as important as well. Even if you are interviewing for a casual work environment, the general rule is to come well-groomed for any interview. Let me know what has been your experience in dealing with recruiters in the comment section below.
Should be good. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So, some really great points that our friend made around interacting with recruiters. I think the first one was make a positive first impression. And, I think that this one is true no matter what form. I talked about 3 different ways that I've seen screening happen. And I think, positive impressions can happen either face-to-face, virtually, in written form, like, right. It all matters, right? Like the grammar that we use, the correct presentation, right? So as much as you can, smile, be friendly, but also be yourself, be authentic. I think is really important. Number 2, keep your social media positive and apolitical. So I think in general and in principle, this one is true. What I would say, and a little bit of a pushback here on this one, would be it's important to be yourself. And I think if there are causes that are really important to you and that you feel deeply rooted in you, whether it be, religious or, just a value that you hold, I think that's okay to let your stripes show a little bit on that. And, I think if a company chooses to pass on you because of that, that might be a litmus test or something that you might not want to pursue anyways, right? So number 3, dress for the position. Your appearance matters, and if you're on Zoom, create a professional background. I think this one is low-hanging fruit. I really do. To how hard is it to pull up your camera on your computer and just make sure that what people are seeing in your 2 feet radius is appropriate, and that your attire is professional, which I'm sure I'm looking at everyone on the call, and it looks like, for the most part, we're doing good on that front, right? But as much as you can, recognize that, your presentation is part of your brand, and, that will speak to certain recruiters in terms of if they want to move you forward, depending on what the role is. Number 4, remember you can negotiate, including a higher salary, as many in addition to other things as well. So we'll get into that in a minute, but I think you can always negotiate. And then number 5, make sure you have positive references. I think it's really important to make sure that people are aware that you're going to use them as a reference. I can't tell you how many times contacted people that were kind of caught off guard, and you could tell, right? And so I think that just shows a level of lack of preparedness when that happens. So make sure that the people that you put forward are ready to go to bat for you and be your advocate. So, and next slide, Claudia. Perfect. So 8 factors that affect selection. So number 1, preparation. So we've talked a little bit about that already, right? Like making sure that you're going through your resume, doing your due diligence in terms of understanding that you can articulate, the various moves that you've made or gaps that you have, or critical experiences that you've had that you either gained a lot of knowledge from or had maybe some opportunity areas that unveiled themselves to you. So, and also making sure that you are presentable and prepared in whatever modality that interview happens. But number 2, ability. So, obviously when people are posting a role, they're looking for candidates that can perform at a certain level. And, I think your ability to convey what you've done and how that translates to what they're looking for. We talked a little bit about that as well, right? Making sure that we can capture what the requirements are and qualifications are that interview team is looking for is really important. Number 3, motivation. So this one I think is important to a company, but I also think should be equally, if not more important to all of you, right? So I've learned this lesson in my career. Actually, the company I was at prior to Medtronic was a for-profit higher education institute, and our values were not in alignment, right? And there was friction from the get. And so I think that as much as you can do to understand what that company is about, what values they hold, what missions they hold, and then how does that align to your own personal credo and what you are hoping to contribute both to the company, but also to the broader community that that organization operates in is really important. Number 4, fit. Kind of a controversial term. I don't know how I feel about that one, to be quite honest with you. I think there are companies that look for people that will fit into their culture. And I think, that one might be starting to dissipate a little bit as we understand a little bit more about diversity, equity, inclusion in general. Yeah, Lisa, we do need to change that term. But I'll bring it back to the piece around motivation. I think this is a two-way street, right? As much as the company might be looking for you to be able to fit into, the team to add something. Hopefully, they're looking for somebody who contrasts maybe different traits that other people on the team have. But I think it's equally important to make sure that you also that it's a fit that's appropriate for you, that you're going to get something out of that role, that the people around you are going to be able to provide knowledge to you that will set you up for success in a greater way in your career. Number 5, integrity. So, that is one that the clock starts the minute that you get contacted by a recruiter, really, right? They're looking for how you follow up. They're looking for how you, communicate with the team and how you demonstrate your integrity throughout the interview process. Number 6, connection. This one, I think, I think that where I've seen this come into play is if you know people within the company, right? I think about my time when I started interviewing at Medtronic, and Lisa at the time happened to know their chief learning officer and made it an introduction for me, right? So, but as much as you can, try and connect with people that are at companies that you're interested in. And one thing I've discovered over time is, LinkedIn is such an amazing place for this. And even if you don't know somebody, like right out of, you've never met them in real life, there's an opportunity to make a connection on LinkedIn, right? And make it authentic. I think, Lisa, do you still hand out the 20-minute networking guide Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We actually, Nathan Perez, the co-author of that book, just did our last session or 2 sessions ago, guys.
Oh, well,
yeah,
perfect. So you guys are primed.
Yeah.
Then you're primed to understand that, networking is a two-way street. But I think that that's a great guide to authentically build connections, even in a virtual capacity, because let's face it, if you wait around to meet them in person, that chance might be years out, right? So if you take the initiative to connect with people, that might have a benefit. And then number 7, attitude. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. And again, I think the clock kind of starts when you first get contacted by that recruiter. And also, I can't tell you how many times. In fact, I just got a recruiter that reached out, and I always take the call just to understand what the role's about, but, way low ball, right? Like in terms of salary. And, I could say, I've insulted that you would even think that I would be interested in this role. Or you can say, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what my next kind of critical experiences that I am hoping to get out of a career or next role. And here's what, that would cost. And I would love to connect you to people that I know, et cetera. And I think that goes a long way to even kind of pipeline yourself for future opportunities that might come through. And then lastly, competitiveness. So, what differentiates you from the rest of the pack? And I think that, hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit about that one in terms of how we differentiate ourselves as we move forward. So next slide.
So Sam, can I just jump in for a second? So there's a lot of terminology we're throwing around here, and could you just give us a minute on what means the same thing? So we talk about job descriptions, requisitions, openings, postings. Are all those things the same, or how are they slightly different? Can you just kind of address that so people
Yeah.
have that foundation?
Yeah. Okay. So just to recap, requisitions, postings, what was the other one?
Job
That needs to be-
description.
Okay, sure. So basically, you guys, when a role gets identified internally to a company, you know, the hiring, there's usually a process that HR is kind of architected, and you know, hiring managers need to go through these various steps, right? And so they'll need to get you know, approval for that role, and then from there, usually the next step is they need to complete a job description, because that then goes into, you know, the level that the role will be, and how much, you know, the salary band will be for that role. So they need to then fill out in a job description, kind of, it's you know, if you were to go to Indeed and look at any, you know, posting that's out there, there would be, you know, maybe a blurb about the company, the qualifications that the role, you know, that they're looking for, maybe tasks might be a better word. And then like kind of requirements, and then preferred requirements is usually kind of how a job description is laid out. So a job description is simply, you know, it's a way of communicating what the role is, as well as, you know, what they're looking for. A requisition is usually where that job description is either housed or viewed on the side of like the interviewee, so you guys, right? So when you go to Indeed and you know, search a job that you're looking for, it'll pop up a requisition number, and then the job description is in that requisition. I hope that makes sense. For, you know, a talent acquisition person, that requisition is usually, you know, it looks a little bit different on their side, but they're getting to see, you know, how many people applied to a role, you know, how many people maybe they, you know, qualified to move forward in the process or declined, etc. So, and then let's see, what was the other one, Lisa? Posting, job description, requisition. Did I cover them?
Tell us about, I think the posting tie to the JD and the rec is good. Like,
okay, sure.
The posting is what goes on to either the career website of the company and or like an Indeed or Monster or Snag a Job, right?
Yeah, those like big platforms that host basically requisitions or jobs that companies have. They all get kind of sent out, right? And you can look at them all together. I think the other thing that I would just point out about postings from a talent acquisition or HR side is usually there are requirements that they have pertaining to like how long a requisite or how long a posting can be up for or should be up for. So like in my case, it had to, anytime I posted a job, it needed to be up there for a minimum of 7 days, right? And then after that, I would like usually like shut it down immediately because there were already 100 some applicants, right? So I think one piece of advice that I would give you with that is as soon as you can apply for the role, if you see it, don't wait because it might not be there when you look, especially in a competitive job market. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions. If there are further questions or you need help delineating, please feel free to use the chat feature and I will answer as we go. So we'll move on now to
just to address that word fit, we need to take it out of our vernacular altogether because to me it's become almost a microaggression term. So what we mean at Prosperity Ready by that word is how you match, how your qualifications match to a job description / requisition / posting. So it really is, do you have the requirements and the background and the experience that match what is needed for you to be successful and for the company to successfully employ you. So I'm glad you called that out, Sam, and we are going to fix that, because fit is sort of a hidden, it's kind of like the term that recruiters like to use and hiring managers. Oh, did you like that person? Do you think they're a fit?
Like,
Oh no, I don't think they're a fit, or no, I didn't really like them. It's very squishy language, and we need to be fact-based when we're talking about human qualifications for jobs, and not get into that gray area.
Maybe one other on that note too, like one thing that I usually, the last time we did this session, Lisa, I hit on this a little bit harder at the beginning, but I think one thing that I want you guys to take away from this loud and clear, at least from my point of view, is that this is a two-way street, right? And anytime that you're looking for a role, like you don't get the role, right? Like there are many times many times that I've been a silver medalist or like a second runner up, right? And usually the like cop out is, oh, they thought you'd get bored quickly, or, like they didn't think you would stick around very long because, you would be able to do the role quickly. But there are times where, people, to the point that Lisa was making around like fit, they might pass on you because of that. And to me, that is a redirection. It's not something to take personally. It's to understand that, that company, that role, that hiring team would not have been the ideal environment for you for whatever reason. And know that you are, whole and wonderful just the way that you are, right? And to know that and to leverage those strengths, I think is really important and really powerful throughout this process. So make sure you seize that power, and we'll talk a little bit about brand, hopefully here in a little bit. But so let's talk about formal interviews. So kind of synopsis, we're going to talk about the questions that you'll be asked, questions that you should ask, and then how to make a strong close and follow up. So Claudia, if you could advance us. All right, so some questions that you'll be asked. So one kind of open-ended one that is usually included in both screening but also formal interviews is, tell me about yourself, right? So I think, as I was just talking about brand a little bit, I like to start with like, what's my value statement or value proposition as a person, right? And then how does that translate to professional Sam, right? And the value that I want to bring. So I think, just as a company has values that they put to paper and hopefully live as well, it would serve you all to take a step back and do that for yourselves, right? Like, what is important to you in life, and how do you want to show up? And also, like, what do you want to convey to people, right? Is it, I think we all have, hopefully people have heard the term intersectionality, but like we all have different identities that we attribute to the broader like makeup of ourselves, right? So you might be a mom, you might be like a spiritual like leader within whatever faith you practice or don't, right? You might be a community leader, you might be a volunteer of a certain cause. So making sure that you can articulate like who you are, what you're about, and make it personable, I think, to whatever extent you feel comfortable is really important. So number 2, behavioral questions. So these are, I think, probably the hardest piece of interviewing. So, an example would be, tell me about a challenge that you faced in your last job and how you addressed them. Or another example would be, what is the toughest feedback you've received, and how did you maybe apply it to a better outcome? So when you're presented with these, what's helpful to think about is, what was the situation? Let me pull up this slide really quickly here. I think it's really helpful to think about, what was the situation? What was the challenge that you faced, right? what did you do? Like, how did you react to it? And then what was the outcome, right? So those are the kind of anchoring points that I like to think about. So, it also is helpful, and you can even just like Google behavioral-based interview questions to start practicing these, because they come in many different forms. But, I think it's always good to have kind of like a work-related one, a personality conflict one, and make sure that you can demonstrate like, what was the situation? What did you do? And then what was the outcome? And then what did you learn from that situation? I think is really important. Number 3, why do you want to work here and why do you want this job? So I think that goes back to that value alignment piece that we were talking about earlier. So if you can already have that done before you get in the interview, that one should be a pretty slam dunk one, right? So, and then 4, what questions do you have for us? So I think it's always helpful to have a list of questions. For me, I usually like to ask questions that are related to, the company's like financial performance or challenges that they might have. I usually ask questions related to like their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not only like what is stated, but also like what actions are they currently demonstrating. So make sure that you have like a good 4 or 5 questions that you can ask going into an interview. If we could advance, Claudia, let's take a time. Cool. All right. So questions you should ask. Okay. So I kind of already talked about this. I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but it's really important to research the company that you're interviewing with. And so, I think right now, especially, there's so many like supply chain issues, talent shortage issues, all sorts of things that are going on in our broader market. And so, try and understand the trends that company or industry is coping with, and then how you can add value to that. What are some key challenges for this position is always great. I think another piece of that would be like, what would success look like in this role 6 months to a year down the line, in conjunction with what the challenges are? What other departments, positions, et cetera, does this position need to work with to be successful, so that, you're demonstrating that you care about the stakeholders that you'll engage with, and ensuring that you're going to be a team player. And then what is this company doing to ensure employee safety during the pandemic? So I think that gets at that broader kind of social awareness, as well as like corporate responsibility, social corporate responsibility. So, I think, questions like that are really important for you to understand, because it highlights, how employee centric they are. Makes a big difference. And then
I'll jump in with another tip. And I don't know if we talked about this when we were talking about corporate culture, but if you really want to research an organization and they are publicly traded, if a company is publicly traded, they have to post recordings of their shareholder meetings, whether they be quarterly or 2 times a year. And listening to those shareholder meetings and hearing how the CEO and the CFO and the chief marketing officer talk to each other and respond to Wall Street is a huge research tool. And it really helps you understand how the very top part of the company is getting along. And if you can tell by their tone of voice and how they respond, how well they respect each other, and how much they're kind of in concert with one another. So that's usually you're not going to find that on the career page. That's not posted there. It's going to be posted under their financial page or their investment pages.
Yeah, it'll be buried, but find it. That's a great tip, Lisa. So, and I think, I don't know how many finance people we have on the call, but one thing that I'm discovering as I, get deeper into my career is like the more you can get tapped into the finances of an organization, the better. So anyways, finally ask about next steps in the interview process and what the timeline is for filling the position. So we talked about this earlier, but I think it's just really good to understand kind of the broader process that team is using, as well as to just ready yourself for the long haul, because it might not be a super fast process and usually isn't, right? So temper yourself. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so making a strong close and follow-up. So recap your key strengths and how you are relevant, or how they are relevant, rather, for success in the position. State your passion for the company or the type of work, and be honest. Thank the interviewer for their time. Send a thank you email. Afterwards, reflect on your answers during the interview and what answers impress the interviewer, what answers need to be improved. I think the last kind of couple bullet points there are really important, just because, and I don't know how many people here are like really practiced at interviewing, but I do think it's a muscle that needs to be built. And frankly, I used to practice it more, even when I was at Medtronic. Like I said, I would even apply for roles to go through the interview process and make sure that stayed primed, because it is you get better at it the more practice you have. So, doing that reflection and noting what answers or what examples for behavioral-based interview questions worked well, how could you tweak them slightly so that they're even more impactful? That would be a good diary to start, just in terms of the overall process, but also like how do you put your best foot forward? Can we move to the next slide, please? Can we ask for interviewers' feedback? When is the best time? So great question, and I totally think you can. I think one thing that I would say is likely they might give you kind of a canned answer, and it might not be as impactful as you were hoping for, and that's just because they're covering their own butts, right? Like they don't want to expose themselves to any undue risk. But there certainly are some recruiters or hiring leaders that will do the right thing and share that, right? But I also think, Gabrielle, and I've been watching you, and you seem very like attuned, and I can tell that you're paying attention. So I think, you can read their language, you can see their facial expressions, you can see the grimace, you can see the nonverbals that are coming through. And I think that you can, that's communication too, right? So, yeah. All right. So last slide here. So negotiating the offer. You can always negotiate no matter how tough the market, but especially now that it is an employee's market. So some things to consider. So unless the offer is spectacular, always say thank you, and then say that you need, like, usually they give you a 24 or 48 hour time period to respond. So take that, marinate on it, and see what maybe you could ask for. Even if it's not salary, it could be paid time off. It could be, other benefits that might make a big difference to the total compensation. Number 2, ask yourself, is this offer great? Is this offer good but needs more? And then thirdly, is the offer not worth negotiating? So I think one tip I would give you is Glassdoor. I don't know if everyone's familiar, but they house quite a bit of compensation data. So, go and evaluate, like, what is the market for whatever role you're applying for? And also, like, within that company, sometimes even you can find the range. And how does that stack against that? And, I think one thing too is don't be so hung up on the number. I think, for me anyways, I rated experience much higher than I did compensation for a good portion of my time in early days in corporate America. And so, like, if it was a critical role that would advance me quicker, I even, for that example of that company that I worked at that wasn't great into Medtronic. I took a demotion, basically, like a title down, right? Because I knew that it was a global company with more opportunity and would advance me further, and it has. So then third, identify your top concerns, ideally no more than 3. You can always raise these concerns once in the process. Give a range for a salary or offer options. So I think that this one is a good point to kind of hover over for just a second here. And I know we probably need to get going to the break. Do we do a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, Claudia? Quickly.
We were planning on doing a 5-minute break today just because we do have the panel.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so I think, like I said, I think even before you go into negotiating an offer, I would encourage you to think about, maybe next to your value statement, what's important to you in your career at this point in time. And I'm a big believer in what's called like a career lattice. So meaning like you can, a lot of people think like careers are only vertically, like you go through a ladder, right? Like you're a specialist, a senior specialist, whatever, a manager, a senior manager, and you can only go up, and that's the only direction. And I think it really depends on where you are in your life, right? And what matters to you. If you are a new mom or a new dad and you want to, invest that time with your kids, like that might factor into the roles that you're wanting to pursue, the amount of time you want to give work, whether it be part-time, et cetera. So, know what's important to you. If money is important to you, that's at the top, then I think, really being sure that you're clear about what the market data says, what that company's sort of comp philosophy is, as much as you can tell through Glassdoor and maybe connections that you have. Be realistic, and also be pragmatic about your own experience and where you are in your career. Like if you don't necessarily have the most experience, know that, they're taking a risk on you too, right? And so that might affect your compensation, but it might not affect the amount of time you could ask off for, right? So it might be, there might be a PTO piece that you ask for, and they can always say no, right? Like I know as a recruiter, I was kind of tough and like I was, usually kind of stuck to, here's the offer, like this is a great company and great opportunity, and we want people that are committed, and so let's see how committed you are, and if not, like, that says something too, right? So just, you have to know that recruiters, and hiring teams, they have their limits and what they're operating in within as well. Is that the last slide here, Claudia, or is there one more? I think there's one more. Okay, so sorry, I'm jumping the gun a little bit as well here. So compensation. So, broader than just salary. Usually there's, could be a bonus, could be stock options. So, really have to research what the salary range is within your market. And know if you're like in the Bay Area, it's going to be higher than it is in here in Minnesota, right? And so know that. Always give a range. So don't like totally show your cards. Make sure that you're allowing for them to come back and hopefully give you a more favorable amount than what you were even hoping for. Don't lowball yourself. And then timing of first increase. So Lisa, maybe you can elaborate on what that one means a little bit. To me, I think I know what it means, but are you referring to like when they'll be eligible for promotion? Okay, so like in the case of like for me, I'll use myself as an example. So I got hired like right before the end of the fiscal year. So I was not going to be eligible for merit. So in my first like job at Medtronic, I did ask for a pay bump because I knew that I was not going to get that, like, let's say 2 to 4% increase at year end. So I factored that in, right? So I hope that makes sense. And then hire on bonus. You can always ask for a bonus, some common reasons might be you had tuition reimbursement that you will have to pay back, right? Or you have a bonus that you're going to be leaving behind because you're making a leap over to a different company, and they'll usually give you a higher end bonus to make up for that. And then again, some other areas that are not compensation focused, but are also negotiation points would be vacation, PTO, the start date. In this new kind of hybrid environment, work from home versus face-to-face, and then other benefits. So always pays dividends to go on the careers page. Usually there's a benefits section that kind of lays out what that company offers, and decide again what's important to you at this stage of your life, and maybe where you can push that employer to operate a little bit more boldly than they wanted to initially. So that would be my advice. Anything else to add there, Lisa?
We do have a really good question in the chat. If we could answer that before we go to break, and then we're going to have our panel. So I know this has been a lot of information tonight, everybody. And if you have additional questions, we can answer them next week. But we do have a great question from Ali. A recruiter from a YouTube video stated that when scheduling your interview date, choose the soonest date. They said this is because recruiters may decide to interview 10 people, but may decide on choosing a candidate from earlier interviews and not pay too much attention to the later interviews. Or may not, in my experience, may not even continue interviewing people if they think they found the one. How accurate / common is this?
I really think it depends on how a recruiter runs their desk. So it goes back to that piece of how are they reviewing resumes? That it varies from recruiter to recruiter. What I would tell you is that for me, I would not engage a candidate unless I was sure that I wanted to connect with them in some way, shape, or form, right? So at the end of the day, they, meaning recruiters, are gatekeepers to a candidate experience. And so that would be a poor example of recruiting in my experience, or in my opinion. I typically, I think if a recruiter reaches out to you, the correct thing would be for them to follow up regardless of if they found the perfect candidate, because especially in this market, that perfect candidate might have 3 or 4 different options, right, at the end of the day. So could be true, Ali, bad form. And I would say if I experienced that, that would, probably be a check mark in the negative for that company and that experience. And I would encourage you to keep score, right? Like I said, it's a two-way street. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
We have our speakers there for everyone to see. So yes, welcome Emily. She is currently a product manager at Best Buy, focused in the benefits and absence and total rewards. And so we're very excited to be here. She's also one of our wonderful resume coaches. And so we're very grateful to have her on the Prosperity Ready team. Emily, would you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started with our questions?
Yeah, hi everyone. Emily Zen. So I'm super excited to be back. I spent over 10 years working in corporate America. Started, with my internships and super excited to help you guys to find your fulfilling careers, or maybe thinking about pivoting. But yeah, for me, I've been in healthcare, retail, kind of all over different industries, and I started as an IT consultant and worked my way up from being a consultant to a product manager. And currently supporting the HR total reward space in Best Buy. And being a product manager is really help the business to manage expectations and and come up with the latest and greatest technologies to help drive business results. And super excited to keep working with you guys and share a little bit more insights in my career journey.
The question that we had reserved for Emily to ask, it's a big question, and so we'll start off strong, but it was, where do you think the hiring process needs more improvement, and what advice do you have for navigating the barriers in the hiring process? So it's a lofty question, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. I think, in navigating the hiring process, I would say, I want to think about if I were applying for a job and, connecting with the hiring managers and stuff. I think for the most part, it's very important to showcase your strengths, right? And when it comes to building the relationships, I know usually you have half an hour or 45 minutes. And for me, I would say I'm really looking for someone who has that, go-getter mentality. Doesn't matter what kind of job you're looking for. Demonstrating leadership skill is pretty critical. And when you tell a story, right, by using the STAR technique, you usually you can just highlight the context but then really be precise with what action items you actually did to make it happen. So really focus on the meat of the interview. And when I interview with a lot of candidates in the past, usually they really passionate about telling their stories, but then maybe they didn't highlight what exactly they did in order to make it happen. So really want to highlight that when you're going through the interviewing process, because as a hiring manager, we really want to focus on what exactly how you contributed to the project, not how your team specifically contributed to the project, more what role did you play, that type of thing. And so that's one thing. And also building a relationship is more I feel sometimes a lot of great candidates out there. Oh, sorry. Did someone say something?
Oh, I think we have another panelist joining. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No, Lisa, I just want to make sure that I'm answering,
You are. No, this is awesome. Okay. That's perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
So I can share more as
leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Semi's joined us, so let's introduce Semi and then we can jump back into our questions. So yeah, that's great feedback. And Emily as well as Semi and Sharif as well, who isn't here tonight but gave us his answers. They're all hiring managers. So we've got this really awesome mix of HR leaders with Sam and myself, and then hiring managers, business leaders who have their own viewpoint about things. So Semi, thank you for joining. We are going to keep rolling here. Emily, do you want to kind of finish your answer, and then we'll ask another question? And guys, post in the chat. We'll absolutely open it up to Q&A in a few minutes as well.
Yeah, I would love to wrap it up. Thanks, Lisa. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of improvements or how to navigate, I'm just trying to really thinking about through the lens of you being interviewed, right? And what is going through the hiring manager's perspective. And, it's very important to build the relationships. And I know it's hard because usually have half an hour. And it's, when I think about who to hire, I mean, I at the end of the day, yeah, we look at competencies, right? But we also look at how can I envision myself working with you, right? So I just felt really showcase your personalities, really, demonstrating how you hey, I'm not afraid to roll up sleeves and, hit the ground running, that kind of mentality, because hiring manager loves to hear that. Yeah, so I have more to share, but right now I just want to highlight this couple topics. So yeah.
Thanks, Emily. That was great. We really appreciate your insight. So now that we have Semi here, we want to do a quick little introduction of Semi before we jump in with some additional questions. Semi, we would love to have you tell our participants a little bit about yourself. We know that you recently got a new job, and we would love to hear a little bit more about that. And then we also have a question for you as well.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. And again, my apologies, Claudia, I didn't get your email. I was looking through my inbox and it's like looking for prospects already. Like, Miriam told me, hey, just look for Claudia. She probably sent out the email. So again, apologies, Lisa. Anyway, to the question, my name is Semi. I mean, I think it's when you talk about faith or kind of chance, opportunity, I ran into Lisa by all of the above. So and she's been wonderful, both as a mentor on the side and also as a neighbor as well. So if I put it that way, about myself, I am an engineer by training. I have degrees in mechanical engineering, materials engineering, systems engineering, advanced degree, and I recently completed a master's also in technology management, and somewhere on the East Coast. I've worked primarily in the medical device industry, in the healthcare, put it that way. I've worked on processes, manufacturing processes and design. And then recently I just transitioned from engineering manager and program managers in medical device industry where I've been for more than a decade, to a technology company, which is Amazon. So it's been a good ride. It's been very busy and fast paced, and then all of that combined together, including being learning experience and learning opportunity. So happy to be part of the panel. And then again, my apologies for running a little bit late.
No worries. We're happy to have you here. So the question we have for you, Semi, is we know that when it comes to interviewing, the next step is also like negotiating offers and talking about salary and pay. And that can always be a little bit of an uncomfortable topic to talk about. But we wanted to ask you if you have any ideas or insight about what some of the best practices are or tips you have for how to negotiate salaries and how to negotiate a higher salary when you're in the hiring process or once you have a job as well.
So as a job prospect, I think the number one thing you want to do is your research. Do a lot of research. Understand your role, the job you're applying for, and also do a market research, market survey. There's a ton of resources out there that tells you what you are looking for. I mean, what you're looking for and what that role pays. And also specifically, as you are widening your net in terms of, I'm looking for a technician, manufacturing technician, or a program manager in this particular in this particular field. Also, you have to zero down to your organization, your company. What does that company pay? Because I came from a medical device industry. A senior manager in medical device industry compensation is different from a senior manager role or a director level at Amazon or whatever you're working. So you have to understand the insights of what do they pay. And then when you do that research as much as you can, it will at least give you a zero. Like you'll be able to zero in on what your compensations, what your values are within the organization. And that will be like a baseline of how to negotiate salary when you get to the salary point. One other thing I would probably want to add to that is when you are negotiating, I think HR personnel should be answering this from more of an HR perspective. You don't go for the minimum that you're looking for. You go for probably a little bit on the above. And also look for other strengths benefits. Does the company, from your research of the organization, you know whether the company has like a bonus, whether they have a stock, whether they have vacation. You just have to make sure you do a due diligence about understanding where you are going and what they pay, and that will be able to guide you into going to a negotiation with the hiring managers and the organization in general.
Wonderful. Thank you for that great insight. Sam or Emily, would either of you have anything to share or add to kind of answer, especially from the HR perspective?
I mean, it felt like you were in our session. I feel like we talked a lot about market research and understanding, the role that you're in the company, and the broader market that you're either going to or currently in, right? So I think, you clearly are well versed and skilled in assessing the prospects. So nothing to add there for me.
Yeah, for me, so Best Buy is probably my eighth or seventh job in my career journey. And I feel like, I just want to mention one thing. Negotiation is not comfortable. And it's okay to like step out of your comfort zone, because negotiating to get the salary that you want probably is the best chance in your entire career for working for that particular company, because even though you get promoted internally, it's not going to be like 20%, like usually I don't know, like 10 to 15%. That's what I heard. So that's why having that base salary is so important, because everything is based on that base salary moving forward within that company. So I know there's so many times I was like, oh my God, I didn't want to talk about this. It's so uncomfortable, asking for more money. But like literally I had to push myself to do it, because otherwise, like you have to advocate for yourself. Like nobody is going to be there to advocate for you. Only you can do it. But yeah, I love what Sam and Sammy was saying. Like you have to collect data, have to, like know where you at, in terms of skill set, the years experience, and how is that compare against different company in different industry. Every single company is so different. Like when I work for Target, it's very different than Best Buy. And so yeah, I totally agree with they saying. Collect as much data as possible, leverage that to help get the salary that you wanted. So
maybe, as such great ads there, Emily, and you sparked a thought in me around something that I added to the last session that we had that I think is really important is, maybe a counterpoint around, you only have the offer point to negotiate. And one of the biggest jumps I've made in my career, I think I was at senior specialist level, and I was keeping very close inventory of the skills that I was developing, the stretch projects that I was on, and then how that differentiated me from my peers, right? And so I think to keep a steady list of what are the values that you bring, or what's the value that you bring both to the role that you have, to the skills that you have for that organization, and to not be afraid to use that as a leverage point. As you operate within your role. Like in this instance, I don't know what the exact percentage was, but it was like a $25,000 pay raise, like basically overnight, because I said, I'm looking at these peers ahead of me. We have the same role, like essentially in principle, right? Here's the value that I'm adding, and it's not measuring up in compensation. So it's not, don't be afraid to take your foot, or be sure to keep your foot on the gas even once you get into role, and make sure that you're differentiating yourself accordingly.
Thank you so much. All of your answers were so helpful and gave a very comprehensive picture in terms of how best to negotiate salaries. So thank you for that. The last question we want to ask before we open it up to our participants to ask questions was originally intended for Sharif, who unfortunately cannot be here today, but he did give us some notes. So I'm going to read a little bit of what he had said, and then if any of our other panelists would like to jump in and add anything, feel free. So the question was, what are the best questions to ask at the end of the interview when the interviewer inevitably says, do you have questions for me? And so we know that this is something that interviewers will always ask, and you always want to make sure that you have at least one, hopefully more than one question, so it shows that you did your homework. And so, but what are the best questions? So Sharif had said that this is a good opportunity to ask something which has not been covered during the interview. This is also a good opportunity to show the interviewer that you have done your homework and that you see yourself in that company. Sharif said to always research the company, visit their website, look at their strategic plan, and review their leadership team before the interview. And then ask a question that is related to the jobs that you are specifically applying. So he said, for example, you could say something, in terms of, quote, I saw on your website that you're expanding your sales in Asia. How do you see that strategy playing out, and how would my work be able to help with that? So that's something very specific and shows that they had done their research. And another similar example would be asking about a new product that they're introducing. So you could say that I saw that a new product or business division was launched last year. How is that working out? And then the third example he gave us a lot of wonderful information, was that if it is a production-based job, ask the interviewer, do you allow people to move between departments? I'm interested in learning different jobs within the production floor and would like to look into that opportunity. And so that's just a way to show that you're versatile, that you want to improve and grow. And so those are examples of thoughtful questions that you can ask that show that differentiate you from other candidates and show that you have really put in the time and effort to learn specifically about this company and the role that you're interviewing for. So with that, Sam, Emily, Semi, do any of you have anything to add?
Maybe just one quick thing, because I think I touched on it like in our session, but and I think the person that provided the feedback raised some really great points. I think in our session we talked about researching the values, and I think if a recruiter or an interviewing team is worth their salt, they're going to make sure that you have the competencies from a business lens, right? Like they're going to make sure that you can perform in the job. And so I think the greater value for questions is really in the softer side, right? So, I'll use my own example. Like I rate pretty high when it comes to like contrarian views and pushing back and challenging the status quo. And that can either go really well or really bad, depends on the system that you're operating within. But, I usually provide that time, like I said earlier, to kind of wrestle them down on like what they're doing for diversity, equity, inclusion. What is their kind of stance or viewpoint on other social kind of corporate responsibility pieces. So I think, from my vantage point, I focus more on the how side than the what side when I ask questions. So it's not so much like logistics or like, can I work from home? Like none of that really matters. It's more about like the environment that I'm going to be operating in and contributing to. And I want to make sure that aligns to who I am.
Sorry, if I could add that to what Sam said. I essentially kind of second that by 100%. I remember when I was interviewing for Amazon, and when it got to a question of, do you have any questions for us? My question was more of the social responsibility of the organization. You want to work for a company that is probably like that is high on everybody's radar in terms of, they're such a good company, they deliver my parcel like the next day. But also they have the bad side in terms of like workers' union, social responsibility, corporate responsibility. So those are the kind of question I asked too. It's not a question that kind of make the hiring manager just blob. It's a question that kind of made them introspect a little bit before giving you a thought. They go a little bit deeper to kind of like tell you, oh, you know what? We know we've had a bad rep. We've had a bad rap with presses, but we're trying to do better. So those are the kind of question, and I definitely echo Sam's comments and sentiment on that.
Yeah, for me, I want to talk about two things. One is the culture piece. I think, both Sammy and Sam already highlighted. It's really important. I want, you guys as a candidate to feel empowered, because as much they love to hire you, you also considering them as well. You don't want to sign up for a job that you don't have a sense of belonging, you don't like the people that you work with, right? So you have to really, really advocate for yourself, meaning you ask the right question, right? For example, for me, I always ask the culture piece, right? Like, hey, how do you, like, through the maybe lens of onboarding, I think like right now, after many like opportunities working for corporate America, I feel like, the onboarding piece is very important. Like, hey, like, I know maybe you can like reiterate, like, hey, based on the conversation, this is my understanding of how I'm going to contributing to the team, right? Like, this is my deliverable for maybe for 30, 60 days and 30, 60, 90 days, whatever. But how does the team support me throughout the onboarding process? What kind of support can I get from the hiring manager or from HR, whoever, right? Because I feel like it's not being talked about right now, but I feel like me working in HR, and I think, just a lot of people have been talking about how to support new hires. So I think it's a great opportunity to ask that question, whether you're interviewing with a hiring manager or HR, like, hey, what kind of support can I get? I know I have to deliver and meeting, business results, but yeah, so that, through that question, you probably can get a lot out of it. And then the second piece is like sense of belonging. Like, do we have team events, even though you work like remote or not remote, like what kind of, bonding event that I can have with my team, with, my stakeholders. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not about how good you are. It's about, the team environment, to make sure that you can continue to set up for success. So doing the research and all of that is great, but at the same time, you have to look out for yourself, for your best interest as well. So thanks, Sam.
Wonderful. Thank you, all three of you, for adding such wonderful information. And with that, we are going to open it up to our participants to ask any questions that they have. So if you want to put them in the chat, if you want to raise your hand and ask them directly, either option is okay.
And don't be shy. Any question is welcome.
Okay, Ollie, it looked like you raised your hand. Would you want to unmute and ask?
Yes. Can we talk more about the tell me about yourself question? Are we focusing on technical skills that we have that would match the job, or can we talk about soft skills or even your own personal values that are maybe not even related to your job, to the position? You mentioned, Sam mentioned volunteering, that some of us might volunteer doing stuff that is not really related at all to the position.
Yeah. So I think, for me, it's really important to make a personal connection as willing as that recruiter or that hiring team is open to, right? And so, and usually if you're in recruiting, hopefully you're somewhat of a people person or enjoy hearing about the nuances of people. It varies by recruiter, but, some things that I like to talk about, I used to just recently stepped off of it, but I used to sit on a alumni board, right, for my Metropolitan State University. So it's an urban university that it's the only other one besides the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities market, and it has, I think, like 56 or 57% people of color, which is remarkable to me, right? And I think it's like the most underutilized institution that we have to tap early talent. And so I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot about, my own personal interests, right? Whether it be spending time with family and my partner, so I think it's wholly, to answer your question, Ollie, it's wholly appropriate to talk about your personal life as much as you feel comfortable. I think, making sure that you can tie that back into who you are, the brand that you're presenting, and how that's going to contribute to the broader organization is important too, though, right? So you might, for example, you might want to, let's say you practice a certain religion, right? You might ask if they have ERGs that are a part of that, right? And how can, what does that look like getting involved? Something like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Ali. Is there any other questions that we have for our panelists? Again, don't be shy. They have expert knowledge. So you want to ask any burning questions that you have while you have the chance. Gabriella, would you want to unraise your hand or unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah. Thanks for being here and for sharing all your knowledge with us. My question is, how is what is an example of a negotiation question? How we can start that part of the conversation? How we can ask for, or how we can start the conversation about negotiation.
I think I'll
Take
start
that
from. No, I do not get it. I'm just going to give my perspective. I'm just going to give my opinion from a perspective of an employee, potential employee. I know those guys are HR experts, so they know all the tricks and things. But they don't know much. So, but from my experience, I think, like I said earlier, your best bet is to do a lot of research. Not, you start your net from the wider perspective in terms of if I'm looking for engineering manager in particular states, in particular industry, then in particular company. So you kind of like narrow it down. Then if I have to be honest with you, I'm a very shy person naturally, and starting negotiation is very uncomfortable for me. But I've gotten to ask myself one question: what do I have to lose? The worst thing they can say is, no, we're not going to give you that. And I think it has helped me in a couple of opportunities where even by saying, no, I'm not going to do that, you got 10,000 or 30,000 more. So the worst they can say is, sorry, we can't meet that. We'll give you this. So cast your net a little bit higher, but make sure it is within reasoning. If you're looking for a $50,000 job, for example, within a particular field, don't say I'm looking for 100,000. You're gonna knock you off, right? But if you say, hey, based on your experience and research, go for the higher level. If it's a 50,000, say, can I have 65? Say, no, we can't give you 65. If they give you 55, you're still gonna be a happy camper, rather than going for the conservative one, and because they're gonna give you. And I think, just like she said earlier, like you want to make sure you negotiate for something because it's going to be your base. And if you don't get a good one at the beginning, it's going to affect your salary and your pay raise moving forward. Essentially, to cap my story, make sure you do your research, go for the big bucks. If they bring you down, it's what they say about go for the sun. If you can't land on the sun, land on the moon, which you're still going to be happy about. I don't know if HR professionals want to add a couple of things. I know they have a lot of things to add to this.
I think that is perfectly said, Semi. And I think the one piece I would just add is, for me, it's usually a wrestling match, right? Like when you start to have that conversation with a recruiter, and I think it happens within the screening personally, and so I'll give you the perspective of the recruiter. So here's what I would say. I would say, what's the salary range that you're looking for, or, what is the compensation that you're looking for? And sometimes, the person would be reluctant to answer. And so my follow-up question to like always get to the nuts and bolts as quickly as, what's the minimum that you would accept for this position? So that it got, right down to the question, right? But I think as a candidate, from a candidate side, I would be, if they ask you that, I would say, I would like to know what the range is for this position. And from there, start to take mental notes. Like, all right, they're asking for 5 years of experience. I have 7. I have a master's degree. It's requiring a bachelor's degree. So you can start to build out those leverage points that you're going to be using later down when they've narrowed you and they think you're fantastic. Then you bring the big guns to the table and you say, I want 65,000 versus the 50. And usually, maybe that's a little bit of a bridge. Like that's a pretty far, jump to make, but they're going to be more apt to give you what you want if you can articulately spell out, what they're asking for and what credentials or, qualifications you have above kind of what they're asking for.
Yeah, that's great, Sam. And then for me, I think just be concise, and you don't, I know I make a mistake in the past. Like I will like wrote a long paragraph, like, like, oh, I have 10 reasons. I'm gonna share with you why I deserve, more money than the one I currently looking at. But it's just maybe 1 or 2 sentences. Doesn't have to be go on and on. I mean, I know there's no right or wrong answer, but sometimes I feel like just be comfortable with the conversation. Practice. I will usually write it down. For me, 3 bullet points why I deserve more, and also say, I really excited. I'm so excited. I really want to make this work. Like, what can you do to help me to make this work? Right? Kind of work with the HR person a little bit and just show your passion, show your excitement. And, you just like, the numbers are not making sense yet. So is there anything you can help me with, and just, top 3 bullet points, like why you deserve it, like based on the market research or whatever, like master degree or whatever. So, yeah, that's usually how I go about it. And, have to feel comfortable. I know it's nerve wracking. You just practice, you do your, super, like hero move. And then you're just like, okay, I'm deep breath and do it. That's how usually I, make it happen. But yeah, you guys got this. It's just make it fun. It's fun. It's fun.
Thank you to all our panelists for those answers. We do have a question in the chat again. So the question was, should we leave the desired salary field blank in job applications to negotiate in person later in the hiring process?
I'll go first. Oh, sorry, Sam.
Oh, I was going to say, sorry. I said usually they don't allow that. Like, usually it's like the applicant tracking system like will require it, which is unfortunate. But I would say if it's optional, then don't. Yep,
I definitely echoed that thought, Sam. I think from some organizations, they're just like, nope, you can't even proceed without having that number. But some, they don't. And I think in some, it kind of go back to what I said initially, do your research and understand what the market is. So you can put a range if possible. But in some cases, they don't even ask. If they don't ask, then like Sam said, like I know with my previous jobs, I've had to have something. And in some cases where I indicated I don't want to, the recruiter's like, nope, I'm not even going to talk to you until you tell me how much your desired salary is. So in those cases, I can't do anything except to tell them what I want. But when they do not, just skip it and go to the end of the conversation.
Thank you, Sami. That was really helpful advice. And I hope that answers your question, Ollie. I see, Nabila, you have your hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thank you very much, panelists, for coming here today. I mean, it's super helpful and so much great information. I have, the first question is a very short one. Well, if you're walking into the first interview, do you ask upfront, are there multiple rounds of the interview, or will that be mentioned beforehand when the recruiter reaches out for setting up that first interview? Or is that, I mean, when do we know that this is the final interview, or if there are going to be multiple rounds? That's my first question. And my second question is, at the time of the interview, because we had an article to read, and I came in with that lens in mind, that there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. So as a recruiter, in the interview, what comes across as a wholly arrogant response versus a confident person who's speaking about her values and what she can bring to the table? Thank you.
Is that directed at anyone in particular, or?
Well, anyone. Thank you.
So I would say for your first question, what I have found in leading searches is that oftentimes you're kind of building the landing, or you're building the plane as you're landing it, or whatever the saying is, right? Like you're not necessarily, like you might have a proposed kind of process that you want the hiring team to follow, but you're also dealing with people's calendars, and you're dealing with humans, right? And they might be really impressed, and they might want to see, They might want to see you drill down and do like a project so that they can see your work product. Like there's so many variables that twists and turns that process can take that it can be kind of hard for a recruiter to define that. So the biggest piece of advice that I could give to you there is you can ask, in the first interview probably at the end of that screening, like, what do you anticipate this process looking like? But I think the biggest piece is to ready and steel yourself that it's going to probably be a long journey, right? Like, and that's okay, right? I think the most important pieces are to be who you are, be consistent on that brand, and bring your best self every time that you're interacting with somebody on that company, on the company side. So hopefully that's kind of an ambiguous answer, but there is no real like perfect formula for that in my experience. And your second question, I'm blanking. I'm so sorry.
I think she was asking what the fine line between being confident and being arrogant when doing interview sessions.
What do you guys think? I'll leave that to Semi and Emily because I feel like I've talked a lot.
Be nice. So from my perspective, I think Sam captured some of it. Bring yourself to the interview, and also in most cases, there's a saying about sometimes the job is about 80% or 70% soft skills and 30% or less technical skills. Be humble in terms of pay attention to the question they're asking you. And then if you don't understand something, don't be shy to ask them to repeat. And I wouldn't expect anyone to argue with an interviewer. I mean, that's probably a fine line that you don't want to cross. If they think you're not answering their questions to the best of your knowledge, ask for more clarification. There's nothing wrong with that. Could you be more specifics? Could you clarify that question for me very well? Sometimes the second time, the third time, you get a question very well and you answer to the best of your knowledge. And don't forget to also follow up with whether the interviewer is okay with your answers. Just be humble. I think it goes a long way in dealing with interviewers. That's as far as I know. I think Emily will definitely be able to chime in more with respect to that.
No, that was great. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's very important to be confident, right? Sometimes I know I'm not native, right? I try to like rush my words to get it out, like I try to speak fast, and then maybe when the question was being asked, just write it down or organize your thoughts. Take like maybe like 3 to 5 seconds to just like really understand what they're trying to ask. Like because I make some mistakes in the past where I just jump right in, and once your thought is all well organized, you build the confidence. You just become more natural, and like you can tell your stories better. So I will, make sure that you guys really know your story structure, right? Really stick with the structure and be confident. It doesn't have to, I know I have a loud voice, but, just make it sound confident. Like I know my stuff, like I've done this. And also I want to circle back to what I was telling you guys earlier. Like, don't mention like, oh, the team this, the team did that. Like, what did you do? What role did you play in order to make this happen? Like always highlight your own contribution because they love to hear that. I mean, as a hiring manager. So yeah. And Lisa also mentioned that, always ask about what the next step would look like in the hiring process. And just be transparent, right? Share your thoughts and in a way that is authentic. I know like sometimes when I interview people, I want them to, feel comfortable, feel authentic, and just be yourself, and you guys gonna do great. So.
Just to answer the first question, I just remembered something. And again, this is an anecdote. This is more from a personal experience. After the first screening, depends on the organization, just like Sam said, depends on the recruiting for recruitment within the organization. And secondly, it depends on the role. When I came in to my new role, The level of interview, the rigorous interview I went through, and when I'm hiring for my team, we don't. This level of interview is kind of different from each other. In some cases, you as soon as you go through your first screening, they would certainly give you a timeline, a schedule of how much interview do you have to do, and the people. In most cases, they'll give you the names of people you're going to interview with, and all of those schedules. In some cases, if you pass through the screening and the screening interview with the recruiter, the HR, it passes you on to the hiring manager and probably another person. I think probably 2 in a day is probably more than enough. In some cases, I remember I've gone through like a 5 days interview, assessments, and sometime out of the 10 people that I was going to interview with, 2 of them couldn't make it, so get rescheduled to another day. So it essentially depends on the organization. And like Lisa said, they will always communicate with you. And also it's part of the research. You remember what I said? Do your research very well. You will understand some of the intricacies of the organization, how they recruit, how they hire, and what level of interviews that you have to go through.
That is
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you so much. I know we are a couple minutes over on time, and we want to respect everyone's time commitment that they made tonight. So we're going to wrap up the panel here, but I just want to thank each and every one of you, Sam, Emily, Semi. It's been so great having you guys here tonight. We've so appreciated all of the insight and advice and tips you've had to share. As Sam mentioned before, feel free to connect on LinkedIn with our wonderful panelists. I'm sure they would love to stay connected and expand their network as well. So as always, we have our learning assessment. So I'm going to post that in the chat here. And then just before I do that, I
just want to thank our panelists and our facilitators, Sam and Semi and Emily. I think this was really good information and just so helpful to hear from people who have gone through these experiences as people of color and as immigrants, and have successfully navigated a lot of the barriers that many people are still facing. So thank you for your insight tonight and your time. And yeah, Claudia, we are landing weekly, we are landing more employer partners. So we don't have a complete list at this time, but I can guarantee that we've got some awesome employer partners that we will share with you in the next few days. We can for sure say, as Claudia said, a Bix Produce Company, which is headquartered here locally, is a new employer partner. So they have professional jobs as well as like mid-level and entry-level jobs. The Toro Company is still on board, and Fahim Lodin can speak to their culture if anyone wants to connect with him on LinkedIn. He started working for them, I think right after Memorial Day. And then Sora Union will be presenting. They are a very unique organization. They hire immigrant professionals for lots of different jobs, design, marketing jobs, translation jobs. You can work from anywhere in the world. So they're an interesting addition. So we will let you know of others as they come on board officially. And yeah, thank you for your time. I can't believe we're almost almost through this cohort. So thank you everybody for attending, and yeah, please do fill out your assessments and let us know any questions that come to you after we end tonight.